Do we have Teddy online?
Yes.
Okay. We do have Councilmember Hodges online today. So we'll jump right in. Item 1.1, review of this evening's agenda. Any comments, changes, questions? Seeing none. 1.2, future agenda items.
You know, I was asked this and I never remember until about 2/3 of the way through the meeting. Oh, by the way, I wanted to.
Oh, so nothing right now,
Yeah.
is what you're saying, okay.
You guys did a great job. Thank you for discussing the RV parking ordinance that was discussed 2 weeks ago. Michael reached out to me and we had that meeting this morning with Clint and just discussed a bunch of different things. Just threw some different things out, like, so it was concerning to me, like, we've literally got 2 places in our whole city that you can park an RV in a emergency kind of parking space, and it's like, well, because we've been opposed to storage units, those kind of things, so it's like, we have to find options for our citizens somehow, somewhere. Anyway, we just went through, hashed through a bunch of stuff. Michael was gonna look through some certain things as far as properties that it might be more appropriate to have those types of storage units on or things like that. Commercial areas that wouldn't be high tax value kind of things. I also asked him to please really come back with, I think the biggest issue is that it's on larger lots, that they would be turning those into RV parking spaces. Please look and tell me, okay, how many are there? I think that there's not gonna be more than 2 handfuls, because there's not a ton of larger lots that are converting to that type of stuff. And so how big of a problem is it really, if it's just because somebody is on a small lot and parking their trailer and it's covering the sidewalk, that's different. We have ordinances for that. Anyway, just to look at some other alternatives. I also have a little bit of, I don't have a lot of heartburn about somebody renting out a space in their backyard for an RV if they have an empty acre lot. But it's not allowed right now, but maybe we look at it in a home occupation kind of thing and allow certain things, because then we can say, do we have to mowed or those types of things. I know of a lot that this is the first time they've taken care of their weeds. It's because they have trailers parked there, so they mow it and keep it mowed, which to me enhances the safety. You know what I mean? It makes it more safe that you don't have and be filled full of weeds that can catch fire and things like that. So I just think that there was just a larger discussion. So I appreciate the discussion that was had before, but I asked Michael to please look into some more of those things. Are you guys okay with him looking into those types of things also? Okay, and then they'll bring that back as a future
work meeting.
Yeah, as a future work meeting item. Okay, thank you.
And thank you, Sherry. Those were good comments today. We appreciated your feedback.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and that, like I said in that meeting, it's hard sometimes to push back, because it's not hard to push back, but I do always feel bad when staff has put so much time and effort into it to say, nah. So we talked about that a little bit too, but he felt like they learn a lot during the process too that helps them make better decisions, so anyway.
Okay, Jared, anything? Teddy, anything?
Yeah, I would like to, I know most of us got out to South Hills Development. I would like to look at that schedule and see if we can't facilitate maybe a special meeting to hear that whole MDA and PIT agreement and see what we can do to help get that in front of us a little bit quicker, especially with these single meeting months coming up in November and December.
So we did schedule an early start for the October 11th meetings, and that's the item that would be on the early start. Is that,
okay?
Are you thinking something different?
Is that specific item?
Yeah.
The idea with that October 11th meeting is to kind of lay out the key components of that project and the proposed schedule from them.
And your process, which process?
And what process we want to do with that schedule makes sense.
I won't be here, I have water left, but I'll be here as soon as I can. The nice thing is we record these, so I can always listen to what was said.
Okay, thank you, Teddy. Okay, 1.3, any future citizen recognitions? I have invited Emmy, her name is Emmy, with Mountain Ridge soccer. She's the one that kind of initiated that fundraiser
Oh.
that they did for that. So they ended up raising almost $10,000 to schools for that. It was just unbelievable. Awesome. And it was fun that I guess there's a player on Mount Ridge whose dad is involved with the Porsche dealer. And he kept saying, I'm not gonna lose the Herriman, so you just keep me posted on if Mount Ridge is behind. So he kept, every time Herriman would get ahead, he'd donate and get ahead. So the rivalry paid off for a great cause, so, but the girl that started it, the player, is dealing with some family member with cancer, so she started the whole thing, and it was a really cool, so they're working with me to get a date to come out, so we don't have this official date yet, so. Okay. 2.1,
2.1.
counter proposal from Lake Ridge HOA for continued use of private roadway.
The clicker.
So we've talked about this quite a bit. Is it on? You need to click on the actual thing there. Alright, just so this is where we're talking about, this area up here by Black Ridge. This clicker's not working,
Is there a switch on it?
side.
no matter which one I click. Oh,
There's a little switch on the side usually.
Yeah.
It's on.
says it's on. So maybe I'm expecting it to be faster. Oh, there it goes.
Okay.
Maybe. It's just really slow. So this is your location. It gives me plenty of time. I'll hit it long before I'm ready to move to the next one. It's just, are you interested in doing this? We've talked about this. This is the area. There it goes. All right. We have the little. So this part of the road, so about right here, this road turns into a private road. This subdivision existed prior to this project coming in. And it was always planned that their secondary access would be out Bugle Ridge and through whatever they were gonna call this one, cause I think it's still Ora Vista right here. It's one of these roads that turns, as you're going through it, you're all of a sudden magically on a different road partway through. The public uses this. They had originally planned to gate this, but because of fire issues and things, this has to remain open. We've talked about it. We had proposed taking the part in red and, or paying them to use it or taking it. They've come back saying they don't believe, because this is such a short section, that it remains feasible for them to keep it. They're concerned about that, so they're really just asking the city to take it. If we were to do that, my recommendation would be that we record something on the lots here that they recognize it's a substandard road. We're not gonna bring it up to, we'll maintain it like we do every other road, but we're not gonna go rebuild it. We're not gonna add curbs in, or the sidewalks. It is what it
And
is.
they've never asked for that, right?
I don't know, they have not. So it's really up to count. I don't know how much more you want to talk. I think there are some representatives from that group here. If you have questions for them, they're probably,
No, I think, like I said, I think we've been through it, so I think we need to just consider thoughts on their counter proposal. Sherry, I know you've been meeting with them. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on it?
Well, I was really trying to find out my packet, but my computer won't work.
You don't mind?
Yeah, so I guess, when I sat and met with them for a while. And, the thing that to consider is they have incurred a cost that's been associated with basically people trespassing across their private road. And the problem is it's a mess because we allow it. We might not have allowed it, but the city allowed this to happen and be designed this way. And, because it is a HOA, it's essentially splitting them in half. And so even to manage their HOA, it becomes very cumbersome and not feasible for them to even manage their HOA. If you split half and half, it becomes very expensive for them. So then they're like, then you guys can just pay us a trespass fee and it'll be cheaper for you to the other than the trespass fee. And I kind of chuckled to myself and I was like, well, if I was in your shoes, I'd probably say exactly the same thing, right? It's like, it's because it's like, this is property we owned, you made a mistake on it, and it's created a mess, and now you only want to take back ownership of half of it, but then you're gonna continue to create a mess for us on our HOA for what will cost you significantly less than it would cost us to maintain it as a private road. So, did I sum up what you were talking about? Okay. Anyway, what do you guys think?
Trespass. It doesn't sound like the right term. We've trespassed across their property. We created an easement already by doing it for so many years, but I don't see how the road, I mean, that section of road should become a city road. The first half is just whether the council, what they want to do with the second half, because it does access that other neighborhood. I don't see how the cost of that piece that's being left, roughly 800 yards, makes up the majority of the fees to take care of it. There would need to be something recorded, like Nathan said. I've looked at the photos, and there's no sidewalks, no curb and gutter. Somebody that comes in later that wants to buy a house needs to know it doesn't come with curb and gutter and sidewalks, and they're not going to get it from the city. That would cost the city a ton of money in the
These
future.
are all the things that we've talked about before, so part of that is, one, at least our own rules at this point prevent us from doing that unless they bring it up to city standard, et cetera. This is maybe extenuating circumstances because of the way that it's happened. Maybe it's unique, that it sounds like we can't find any other areas that have a similar issue like this. So I'm always worried about the precedent, right? Because as time goes on, every single HOA that's paying to maintain the roads, when it comes time to do maintenance that they realize they need to do, we get these requests many times every single year. We want the city to take it.
Yeah.
So that's my question to you is, if, one, what would, I guess, Leo's recommendation be, if we agreed to do this precedent, right? Does it open us up for other stuff? What would we need to record against the properties to avoid being required to bring things up to standard? All those things that I don't think we know enough about those details to give direction for all of those things.
I don't know that we have any other situations quite like this where we've permitted one subdivision with public, and this is gonna be your secondary access, shown the way it is, and then partway through the design review for the second subdivision, it switched from public, because I think the first plans were a public street. All of a sudden it switched to private, went through and closed with the neighborhood who already existed saying, hey, how are you doing this? And the staff, I don't know that exists anywhere else. I mean, we have
Anthem did it a
public
little
and
bit.
private where they mix in these weird situations.
Anthem did it in some of their subdivisions with arches and those, but we made them put in their plat that those roads are all acknowledged as use for the public. This plat didn't say that. We solved it with those. This one's a little different in that.
So, which would have been a solution back then. Do it.
So, is there any, precedence for compensation if the public had been using that road for all this time?
I'd have to look and see, but as far as setting a precedence for other city or other streets wanting to come in and have something like this, we can do this as a unique situation. I don't think it sets us up for having to take over other streets that are private and then,
I would suggest if we really wanna get into like nitty-gritties of legal advice and things, that would be more appropriate in a closed session.
Yeah,
I think this is the right thing to do. I've advocated for that from the beginning since I'm in front of it. I don't think they created it. I think it doesn't matter who, but I think the city created this. And I think it is unique.
The city and the developer is one that benefited.
Right.
yeah.
That's right, and the cost is minimal, this is one of those, we've been dealing with this, these poor homeowners have been dealing with this. I'd just like to take it on, let's move past, let's let them get back to not worrying about this, let's us not, we've had this 3 or 4 times, I think.
Let me ask you this, if an HOA dissolves, I mean, this is the issue always, and this is why I have issues with HOAs a lot too, is because then they just dump the roads back on you, they can go in and dissolve and say, here you go. It's very difficult to say, no, we're not gonna take you, when you're in our city, right? So in essence, they could just do that, and so to me, this feels like a more honest approach to come and say, look, especially if then at that point we can say, look, okay, but we're gonna put it on your deeds that we're not gonna come in, so anybody that buys a home in your area or things like that understands not to have an expectation and come and just assume the city's gonna do something about it. Is that correct?
So I don't know what HOAs have in their CCNRs and things like that that would allow them to just turn a street over to a city and say, we can't take care of this anymore.
Well, they just dissolve and go away, right?
I don't know. I don't know how HOAs,
Oh, yeah.
I know they
do.
acquire money from their residents, but I don't know what the end is when they do that. But I'm sure, yeah, the city couldn't just leave a street sitting there without any.
Yeah. Cause I know it happened, the HOAs dissolve and then the city's just kinda left holding the bag with subpar roads and streets and stuff like that. But anyway, I don't know, that was just something I was wondering too.
I'm willing to consider this, but to me the details matter.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna share an out loud thought about this. It's not necessarily advocating or talking against any decision here. The thought occurs to me that this HOA, that the people who bought homes here knew they were buying into an HOA and they're paying a monthly fee into their, or an annual fee into their HOA. And that at least a portion of that road maintenance is built into those HOA fees. If we as a city take it over, they're absolved of that HOA commitment that they made. And all of that financial responsibility turns over to the city when that isn't the terms under which they purchase their properties. Does that make sense? And I can completely agree and I appreciate what I consider a very fair analysis of the road maintenance costs. There's no proportionality here or anything like that, so I just appreciate this is half and half. It's great. I think it's very fair. I don't have any problem working on a way to either, take it and forgive it or whatever. I think those are all great solutions. It is this aspect of a homeowners association agreeing to a quote unquote special assessment, if you will, to cover road maintenance costs and common property costs. And now they're gonna be absolved of that responsibility if we take it all over. And so I guess I'm just asking a question out loud. Are we comfortable just allowing that to happen? Or do we feel like there's still a responsibility for these homeowners to continue to pay for a portion of that road maintenance because that's the commitment they made when they purchased their homes?
The only counter I will make to that is that their road will deteriorate quicker because of the public use as well.
Right, and I'm not saying we shouldn't pay our portion of it, right? I totally understand. I mean,
we
even
have-
taking it over is fine, right?
We
Like,
have been plowing, we have
Right.
been doing other
Right.
things, so I mean, there's a lot that calculation doesn't take into account that we've already done.
Jake, did you have a comment? Go ahead. I know you've been good to work with on this.
I was gonna say, just to that, I mean, the expectation when we bought our home, and we're one of the last to buy a lot there, was that this is gonna be a gated community someday. And so we're like, oh yeah, we're willing to pay a higher HOA fee for that. We pay the same property tax rates as, Lookout Ridge, who's accessing that road. So the additional fee seems, a little bit like, oh, you're not getting your gate, and you have to pay more than the people that are using your road to access their neighborhood. Doesn't seem exactly fair either.
and I appreciate the
Yeah.
feedback. I think,
On the red
Again, this
portion,
is
I
a-
agree with you, the green portion, that's not the case.
Yeah.
however, the green portion even still, because the whole banded HOA was probably how you did count dollars and cents. And then you don't have the availability anymore to have the promised gated community, which is a perk, right? It's just part of the reason people buy a home.
Teddy?
I have a comment. Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So right off the bat, living in an HOA is always fun. I currently live in one, since I've moved to the city. but the level of service is going to change, and they're going to have to realize that if we do take over this section of road or even the complete road, our plow services are not what they're accustomed to, especially in the cul-de-sacs. So that's one thing we'll have to make sure they're aware of. Also, they still have HOA dues and fees for their community area and common space. So that's not going to totally dissolve, but I think to Steve's point, Steve's right on the bat. Like, there's still some sort of road maintenance or road upkeep or even reserves that they should be planning for and contributing some. I don't know what that looks like or how that's going to make it easier or less complicated, because it is a complicated situation that we helped cause, or we let cause anyways. So that's my 2 cents.
And that's the difference, is the green section and the red section really are different problems. It does create one big problem, right? But I guess I'm just making the argument they could be considered as 2 separate cases.
Which is why we presented what we did
Yeah.
last time.
Yeah, right. And so I guess I would just say, look, all things being considered, there might just be an easy solution, and I don't wanna overcomplicate it necessarily and make this a long drawn out thing either. But I don't think I'd be doing a job if I didn't at least raise that question of, at least for the green portion, there's a substandard road that's gonna have different maintenance timelines and stuff than the rest of the roads in the city. It may deteriorate faster than other roads in the city. It may need additional service that other roads in the city don't need because it was constructed to substandard.
What maintenance has or has not been done.
Exactly, all of those variable things, right? I guess I'm just wondering, and I'm just asking the question, again, not advocating one way or the other. Are we recognizing and understanding and absolving the residents on the green portion of any future liability for the costs of that road that are different than what we would anticipate from any normal city standard road?
And just to kind of piggyback on that, I don't wanna say philosophical idea. Talk about the point made that people on a different road we pay the same taxes. Our budgeting and our maintenance program, those costs are based on that tax base and the HOAs paying for their private roads, right? So taking one from this side of the ledger to this side affects all of those taxpayers and the calculus that was done when those private roads.
Yeah, it dilutes the rest of the
Right, so
tax dollars that are
it's
already
not,
being paid.
it's not an equal weighting that way. I believe is a unique situation in many respects from others. So, same thing, open to hopefully some relatively easy solutions, and it looks like it's a fairly small thing. But, and I wanna say this is the only place in the city, but that's rarely the case as we're finding out as these things go on. So, I'm fine, at least for me, fine having that discussion enclosed of, okay, what are all the details that we need to let out, and basically say this is what we're willing to do. But I think we need to have that level of detailed conversation, dollars and cents, and recording things on deeds, and as Teddy pointed out, expectation of service levels. And there is an issue, I think, an equity issue with the green portion, making that a city road that's not quite the same as the other, so. I don't know how else to say it, I'm open to any of these solutions, but all of those details matter, and I think it's more of a conversation that we.
I guess as staff, we're looking for, if you wanna do this, we've got to figure out the paperwork, right, that devil's in those details. This is not gonna show up next week, because we still need to figure out what would we record, what would that notice look like? There are some equity issues if you look at that road. We did do an analysis, I was trying to find it here. When this first started, And I don't know if that, when we're talking about substandard, if it had to do with the thicknesses of the asphalt, or if it would have more to do with the lack of sidewalks. and
So
things.
in that memo, I think it was presented January 11th last year, or this year. We asked for some core samples. I don't know if we ever got them. So I'll have to look and see if we ever had those. So I don't know that answer to the thickness, but it was the width mainly it's a 50-foot wide right of way. The asphalt width is 25 feet, but with the curb and gutter, you get the width, so you don't have to go park inside for fire code.
Except as part of the Black Ridge, we have to expand the parking permit
You have
area.
to expand the parking permit area. There is a lacking storm drain in the road, especially in the green section. So that could lead to some advanced deterioration of the road if you're not catching the storm water and putting it in the drains. So that would be supportive,
And-
not taking the green piece, but
And I guess I'm not necessarily saying there has to be some kind of reconciliation or exaction there. It just might affect whether or not I'd be more towards option one or option two, right? If there's no way to reconcile how the road is gonna perform compared to our standard road, right? If we just can't quite determine that, figure that out, I'm more inclined to go with option two, where we just pay our portion of the costs on a going basis, we reimburse them for the impacts we've already made, and we just allow it to continue to be HOA road, and HOA has to be responsible for the performance of that road over time, right? If we can figure out how do we equitably assign responsibility for the road and deterioration and all that kind of stuff to everyone else, then I might go toward the option. So I guess that's what there's still some questions I would have to answer before I could tell you one or the other. And I hate making this more complicated.
Jana.
This has been going on for
I think
a
the
while.
biggest cost of the city would be preparing the plat and recording it. And if we're amending this existing plat, we'll have to get everyone's signature,
Yeah, everybody on the street's gonna have to
sign it.
sign it.
Our other option.
Would they not also have to redo their CCNRs?
That's really up to them.
Yeah, that would be their kind of their.
Yeah, and I guess I'd like to also understand too, does HOA understand the impacts it would have to their usage of the road? Meaning, like you talked about parking, would they eliminate parking on one side of the road, and would that negatively impact residents? Would it, the no parking during snow events kind of thing, would that impact residents? Would,
And also it would allow people to come and park. It'd be part of our Black Ridge parking, so you'd have to allow people to park up in there.
Yeah, if you don't go into the permit area, it's a public road, you park on both sides, and you go in the permit, you're restricted on the permit you get to pay for.
Yeah, so there's some, we alleviate some problems, we may cause some additional unintended problems at the same time, yeah. Yeah, welcome to the city. So I just think a full vetting of all that stuff, I think, is important before we get to a final decision. But none of this is crazy. I mean, it's all fairly reasonable, but I just don't have enough answers to say A or B.
Yeah, and quite frankly, back to I would not be comfortable having this discussion at all if it was just an HOA wanting to come in and have us take over the roads. Only reason.
Yeah, that would be an easy no, right?
Well, I think we all already agreed on that, that's
Yeah,
why we made this
for sure.
proposal.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That definitely was.
So what's our next steps then?
So what questions do you feel like you would need, or what does the council need to make that decision?
For
We've talked
me, I'd
about
like
it.
to have those discussions.
You have some legal questions, okay?
My question is this, and it would have to, I don't know, again, how we would determine this, maybe it's core samples, maybe it's something else, but an understanding of what the estimated useful life of that road is compared to a standard road, and what that means in terms of additional costs to the city if we were to take it over. If that's substantial amount, whatever we determine a substantial amount, you know, if it's a year ahead of time than it would normally be, and it's, okay, who cares, right? If it's 10 years ahead of time, oh boy, that's a lot more, and then the cost of fixing that road and resurfacing or whatever else. I'd like to understand what that potential cost impact to the city would be, and how we might remedy that, resolve that difference between us and HOA over time.
Just a comment, I mean, if this road was built as a public road rather than if the previous city folks allowing it to not be built as a public road, it would be up to standard. None of the homeowners decided to build a substandard road. And I guess, and the other side of that is if you're paying us to maintain the red portion, you're still paying for half of the maintenance on a substandard road. And it's gonna cost us a lot more, and hence the city a lot more, to maintain a substandard road if we're doing it with this tiny, tiny little thing versus the big economies of scale that the city has.
I don't.
Maybe think about that a little bit.
Yeah.
The hard part is there's a misunderstanding about the road. When you buy an HOA, you're actually buying the road. You're buying a portion of the road, right? Or an interest share in the road. It's a private property situation, even though it's a road and it's just like everybody else. It's a private property, and so it doesn't have to have the same standard. It's not intended to be a public road. It's a private road. You guys can kind of do it as you want, right? In switching it over from a private to a public, now the public becomes responsible for the maintenance of the road. On a daily basis, the plowing of it, the stuff, that's not a massive deal, right? Like, that's not the end of the world. What I'm concerned about is this road have a reasonable lifetime compared to a standard city road? It's not just the width and the size, it's how thick it is. If it's a lot thinner, it's gonna deteriorate a lot faster. That means a normal road might last 20 years, this road's gonna last 12, and we have to replace it 8 years sooner than a normal road. That's an accelerated cost for the taxpayers of Herriman that's unexpected, that would normally be paid for by the HOA. So I'm not saying we can't bridge that gap, but I think there has to be discussion about what that potential cost would be, what the liability to the HOA would be, and how we might bridge that difference. That's all I'm asking about.
Steve, and that should be in their reserve studies for what they're supposed to contribute annually to their reserve for that proper maintenance on the lifetime of that road. So they should have those documents readily handy.
Okay.
And I think they just
For
did
example,
one.
of the road, yeah. Ours says it's a 30-year life, I think it's just a generic assumption.
I was doing texting with Blake and said, a lot of times you can see just by the way the road handles the traffic that's been on it, so.
That road specifically, it's been carrying the traffic for all those years. How is it held up?
Yeah, but
Well, and so if, I understand, maybe we can work through the HOA and see what their reserve study is. If they did take the core samples, then we can look at that and see if it's the.
They didn't take them because the council's decision at the time was no. So we didn't proceed with getting it.
Gotcha.
So an effort to maybe move this along, to kind of restate where we're at, kind of had this discussion already and made this proposal, right? Several of these things and said, we think this is the best way for us to go forward. They've come back and said, we don't like that, we want you to just take the whole thing and consider. So it kind of opens up, either we've already made this offer to make right the wrongs that we talked about. They're asking us to do more, so our conversation doesn't make sense for us for all the things that Steve mentioned, Sherry and I, et cetera, to do that. I'm willing to have that discussion, but it is more complicated with unintended consequences than what's proposed here.
At the end of the day, though, it makes sense for us to take this road over because we've looked at other options about building or even gating this or even trying to find a second option. It's kind of like where was like on Steve's point, where does the help and assistance and maintenance if there's potential early maintenance or early reconstruction or whatever?
let me make it real easy. Is that more or less than $60,181? right? I mean, if they're gonna forgive 60 grand and we have 60 grand in costs it would take to fix the road early, it's a wash. It's fine, right? I'm just saying if they're forgiving 60,000 and we're assuming $250,000 of new costs, that's an unequitable transaction, and that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah, for sure, understood.
I think we have, we'll work with them and see if we can get some of that information.
I don't, so if you're good.
We'll come back on that cost. I don't know that we'll be able to get the information, but we'll see if we can.
You know what, even an engineering swag is better than what I have now, right? I mean,
And it looks like they did an engineering reserve study not too long ago, because they came up, it said 2022, so we can use it.
and that would be a good help too, because at least that's a professional engineering study that would be, makes it reasonable.
I think they have that,
Okay,
so
that's
they'll
awesome.
give that to us, yeah.
And
Thanks,
then
guys.
as soon as we get that reserve, just bring it back and.
Okay.
Yeah. I
Sure.
think, just go back to
Should we wait till
the,
after policy?
some of it's just hard because there was,
Do you want me to forward it to you now?
the design in their HOA was not really based on no fault there.
Yeah, and that's the worst part about this is.
Yeah.
I know, so that's,
Okay, we appreciate you guys, thanks for your patience with us.
gives to keep on giving, yeah. Thanks, guys.
We don't have enough on our agenda, so.
You wanna hang for your dad will be here at 7. I'm not here.
No.
No.
Can you forward that engineering study?
Okay, we're gonna go on we gonna go on then?
Thanks.
Good.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you so much.
Okay, 2.2, traffic signal at Rex Peak.
Yeah, we'll kind of keep this pretty brief, but in our last education meeting, in our first education committee meeting with the Jordan School District, this was a project that kind of came up in our discussions. So as many of you know, Sentinel Ridge and Mountain Ridge High School have had some traffic issues in the past, and we still are dealing with some traffic issues as far as getting in and out of the high school. So that north entrance, which is just below the yellow line there, we've had to go in and restrict left turns out of the high school due to safety issues. There's not a right turn lane in, so people pass others as they're trying to turn right, and then to add it all in, you've got high school drivers trying to turn left out of this road. So, and additionally, it's pretty close to that Rex Peak Way intersection. So ideally, this should have been done in the first place, right? Build a full intersection for both the high school and the elementary. Today, we don't have that case, but the school district is considering whether they should realign the road to that intersection, right? And in our discussions with them, they committed to looking at design funding designed to a certain point, but not construction. And it was a little bit of, hey, we need some word or some discussion from the city to determine if we realign this road, would the city be willing to upgrade what is currently a pedestrian signal to a full traffic signal at that point? So the question is, would we be willing to plan for our next budget, upgrading this to a full traffic signal, conditional on the school district realigning that road? So
Yes.
that's the discussion.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, easy enough.
I think they just wanted, they would like something in writing, I believe, that like a letter of intent or something like that.
Yeah, and they've talked about their MOUs that they've been working with
yeah,
Todd,
yeah.
so that might be something that it comes to an MOU, and we'll work.
Additional language that is
Exactly,
Yeah.
they do want an MOU, and I think it's in
Yes,
their
I agree.
interest and our best interest to have it written down very clear, this is what we're agreeing to.
Yes, because otherwise we could find ourselves back here in a few years saying, what did we all agree to do?
Exactly.
So I think our next steps will be working with that MOU with them, and then we'll bring that when you see that in the CIP, because it has not been in there.
Yes.
That's where it comes.
There also has to be an understanding of estimated completion date and what is under our control and what's
Right,
not.
and
Yes,
we had that
yes.
discussion with them, because some of these arms are out 8 months or some
Yeah, the
crazy
steel
thing.
poles are hard to get us. So that's why it's good to know now and to start having the discussions with the school district right now, right? They did to their credit, have already funded design to a certain point, I think to 60%, and then they were gonna get a cost estimate back and then make a decision on funding construction. So this is just kind of an iterative process.
They did ask us to consider kind of a weird split light system, and that it's
That's
not
what
gonna
I'm
work,
not
so they have to realign in order to make that intersection.
Or they wanted this to like be flashing or something for a while or something, it was like, no.
Yeah, they, and we've looked at alternatives, but this is the best solution for the area, so.
Yeah.
Agreed.
You've got
It's
a lot of cars.
There's a
and a lot of-
safety issue and a traffic flow issue and just so
Huge,
many
and when
things.
the other school opens, I
Oh
mean,
gosh.
don't
We're not gonna
think
talk
that
about
they're
that.
not
We're not
gonna
gonna
come
talk about
that way too. It's just, there needs to be a light there.
Yeah.
It's what's safe.
Yes.
Yeah. But please make sure the MOU is clear in that, that's our intent is to put it in there, but we're at the mercy of supply chain that we can't control. So we won't be held hostage on that.
Ta-da, look, see?
Okay.
See how fast that was?
Okay.
You're gonna start giving all the presentations.
Okay,
That was easy.
2.3, discussion regarding cost participation relocate existing ponds at Mountain Plaza and Outer Mall. Projects.
Alright, so a picture's worth 1,000 words, and this picture has 1,000 words, so we're doing 2,000 words at you today. I apologize, that's a little complicated.
TB, we miss you.
The intent, thank you. The intent wasn't to complicate here, but, so, starting at the beginning, there's 2 existing ponds. You can tell that there's a deep blue colored pond further to the north and one that's deep green. Those are existing ponds that essentially don't service the areas in which they reside. But originally, they were all part of the the Midas Crossing PUD. So they, at one time, actually did service its own project. But of course, now it doesn't, right? Because this was purchased as a separate project. Now that we have Mountain View Plaza, which is the developer to the north, where the blue pond is sitting. And you can see that the area that pond is servicing is also shaded in blue west of Mountain View Corridor. And then you have the Auto Mall pond in green, serving the lightly shaded green west of Mountain View Corridor. The developers are requesting Herriman City to participate in the cost of relocating those ponds downstream so that they can,
You mean Main Street?
Main Street, not
Main Street,
Yeah,
sorry, I've been saying Mountain View Corridor. It's the same shape. Excuse me. So yeah,
slightly less traffic.
the request is that the city participate in the cost to relocate those ponds to the more regional location up in that black dot at the very top of the page. The cost essentially to relocate for the blue pond, which is the Mountain View Plaza, is 50 grand. And then about 110 grand for the pond that's green getting relocated, for around 160,000. The proposed, if the council chose to relocate, the proposed means to do that would be a combination of general fund and ARPA funds. And then, of course, the CDA would pay that back over time. Nathan, did I get that right? I think that was what.
Well, that would be the hope.
Maybe, if it
It's a
generates enough.
So it's a sales tax CDA, so you can have the CDA pay back, or you can just collect the sales tax back in the general. Really, it's a general fund expense. This is a unique CDA in that it is just our sales tax.
And we're currently working with the developers on this request, and at this point, we're just looking for some direction from the council. Should we put together the reimbursement agreement to do so? Or obviously not, would be the other
Why
option.
are they, so you said they're requesting us to participate, but this is a request for us to do the whole thing.
Good question. The costs that are reflecting here are upsizes. So they would have to, for example, the green line, I might get the sizes wrong, but I think it's a 36, for their project alone. But they would have to upsize to a 42 to take care of the green. So we would only pay the upsize from the 36 to the 42. And then likewise for the pond up north.
So one thing to consider, we've traditionally done these big ponds, but in our commercial areas, the potential to generate sales tax, do we want to give up large swaths of that to ponds that hold water a couple times a year? That is something we need to be, just from a public policy standpoint, this new pond up top may want to be one of the underground.
Subsurface descent.
Subsurface ponds, so you still have that land that can either serve as parking or something to a development that returns, has a return as opposed to, again, a big pond. It's not gonna be a park because of the water conservation rules. It's gonna take up your prime commercial land and just sit there for the
Right up
few
against the
times.
corridors, just.
Yeah.
And so you're suggesting that we could make up the cost in sales tax revenue by converting that into tax producing,
Well, I would, in
especially
a,
over time?
It's the same money.
it is the same money, I'm just thinking that over time, we talk about not having a lot of commercial land. It feels really strange to take 7.5 acres of our prime commercial land and say, let's let it hold water a couple times a year when we need it. Cause it's not a constant, it's not a lake that's full, it's not another Black Ridge. It is just a pond, so.
What are you suggesting as an alternative?
Well, I would think if we choose to participate and move these up to that new pond, that part of that is looking at what kind of pond we do up there.
Which is hard
Again,
to
I
do
hate,
with that plan,
yeah,
with the commercial plan. So we kind of might need to push the developer of that area to put together a plan so that we can
size
No.
of pond.
what it needs to look like. Or this thing gets built as a temporary open air pond, knowing we're going to spend some money converting it to an underground pond when we get the plan.
I hate to think that you're taking 10 acres of
Right.
commercial land in this city and saying it's gonna hold water once in a while and grow weeds the other times.
Am I also right to understand that there's gonna be some commercial stuff right on top of that blue pond?
There is, so that one needs to
That one's gotta
move.
be moved,
That's gotta
okay,
go.
just making sure.
And I think even the green pond there, I think most of the plans show that one not being there, again, that's it's not Mountain View Corridor, but it is Main Street, it's a pretty
correct.
visible piece of property.
Yeah.
Agreed.
To, again, tie up for intermittent use.
Weeds.
Weeds.
Yep.
So I think staff's recommendation is that we probably should participate. I think it's there are some potential with some of the ARPA funds that we had intended to spend at Sentinel Park. If that HOA is coming through and doing all that work, we could redirect the
Yeah, it's a ton of money.
80,000 or whatever.
7 figures.
It's pretty, there's some money there. So, we just wanted to know because we need to generate, some reimbursement agreements to come back to you because they would be doing this work. There are actually 2 developers involved, so it's a little bit more complex. We have the Mountain View Plaza and the Auto Mall group, and so working together with them, so just if I see nods for us to bring you something back on that.
Teddy, are you nodding?
Just raising my hand, no.
Not nodding off, but nodding in affirmation.
Okay.
Yes, move on.
Okay.
Let's participate.
JB, do you have?
Okay.
Which,
Yes, they do.
Mr. Mayor, if I might, going back to item 1.2, I told you something would come to me later. I just was recalling something about, I want to discuss, possibly looking at, our ordinances about commercial properties that might, we might just take a look at what it would mean to perhaps restrict certain kinds of businesses in their proximity to each other. I.e., don't want 2 car washes right next to each other, maybe don't want 2,
Similar drink
soda shops right
places.
next to each other, we don't want 2 credit unions right next to each other, that kind of a thing, just so that we can
Can we limit car washes?
spread some of that stuff out, right? So that you can't just say we're gonna prohibit this, but you can say we can prohibit this within proximity to another one, right? And so I guess I'd like to bring that up for a discussion, so.
Every third house has to be different.
The problem is there's only 4 soda shops, and I need a 5th, cause I.
There is a 5th one going in
There's 8
by
car washes.
Leeds.
And a diabetes.
That's right, that's right.
Yeah, so we're gonna be good.
It's diet, no sugar in this at all.
Does that
Dialysis.
create kidney stone with a non-sugar
2.4, discussion on
Thank you.
upcoming legislative priorities.
So this really doesn't need to be a long discussion. We want to start getting this in front of you to think about what our priorities are, and this is in your packet. We provided you what we had done last year. The one thing I might suggest to the council is if there are something, most of what we have done appears to be pretty defensive. We're playing defense, don't do this, do this. If there is something we think needs to happen, maybe it is a completion of 7,300 up to give us another north-south, or there's some work we need on east-west corridor. And I think we should put that in here, and then we should go find partners, whether they're developments or other cities, and push something, because if it's just the defense, I don't know how many bill files there are. Beginning of September, there were 815, it was a record. That was a month ago. So who knows how many there are. If we're just responding to what they're writing, it's overwhelming, and most of those won't go anywhere. But if there's something we think should happen, I would like council just to think about that, and we'll put this on we're gonna meet with the legislatures, but I think it's fine to have the defensive ones. We will oppose these things, we support these things, but if there's something we want, let's put it on here and let's.
And that came from our discussions with our lobbyists.
Yeah, the lobbyists say,
We've
what
gotta
do you
change
want
our
us to do?
tactic. We need to be
So-
asking for stuff.
I have a comment. I know how to help them really save a lot of time and have them.
I can already tell you.
If it's something common
It's not
sense,
smart,
I mean,
but this
is
has
gonna be
been
good.
brought up in the last two, League of Cities and Towns, our big caucus meetings and stuff. We have asked adamantly, everyone that was in those rapid growth meetings, asked specifically, to please stop writing additional legislation that cranks down on more of these housing things until we can see the impact of the legislation you've already enacted. We're just saying, make your job a little bit easier and allow us to gain the insight into what, you've done this great job in implementing this legislation, so let's let it play out just a little bit, so we understand how it really truly is impacting us, and so we can understand, here's some tweaks that maybe we can make, but we cannot keep making tweaks every year if you don't allow the impacts of it to be felt or seen. How will you know that what you're doing right or what you're doing wrong if you never stopped long enough to say what effect did it have? And that has been loudly spoken, and I guess maybe that's defensive, but I don't think it's defensive. It's just saying, hey, thank you for your legislation and trying to address these issues that are facing our communities.
Sure, that's the most diplomatic I've ever heard you.
But we appreciate this, and now as people who are trying hard to implement the new legislation, can we please have enough time to really understand and provide feedback to you of how it's impacting our communities for the good and for the bad? We can't even give them good feedback
What's
yet because we
effective
don't
and
know what
what's not.
feedback to give them. And so that's, if I was to try anything, that would be what I would say. Please just take a breath on some of this stuff and really see what your impact is having.
And I think the league is going
And
to,
that's what I was
that's
gonna
the,
say,
the pitch. If there's something specific to Herriman, I know talking with some of the partners who are here, right, they're saying, if you want us to build all this housing, then give us the money to build these roads so that you can actually do this, because otherwise you're asking people to sit in traffic for 4 hours because there's one road. Well, we have very similar issues. So I agree, I think we should hit that hard. We don't need more, what we need is help from them if there are specific things, so. I don't, if you have one tonight, that's great, but I really just wanted to start getting it in front of you. We have some time before that session. Is there something we should be asking for?
I'll give you three general ones that to me, all go hand in hand and have for years. But we need, with everything you're talking about that they're forcing on us, and density of population, all those sorts of things, we need increased recreation out here. We need to open this stuff up, right? So you've heard me talk ad nauseum about this stuff. Atlantic Center and East-West. There are 2 roads in and out of this place. You're putting tens of thousands of people out here, east-west is of the utmost importance. And relieving that pressure with some recreation, the athletic center, and employment, that would go a long way.
I have to tag on to that because today, when at the community luncheon, the Sandy City mayor was here, and she said, wow, wouldn't it be great if they would take all this gondola talk money and put it towards the east-west connection? That is a mess. And wouldn't it be great, the commerce that could go back and forth? And this is the east side mayor saying, wouldn't it be
Between
great?
Sandy and Herriman, what if we could have a connection
She
across
was
that?
so advocating for that.
Right.
She's
Well,
like, why
It was
does that?
mind-boggling, yeah.
So if we're talking about, and I've had this conversation with Nathan and others over the years, and what's been pushed back at me is, well, there's no political will, right? So when we did the Southwest study, we need to connect east-west, Mountain View to Bangor. Just that mile or so of road, right, makes a huge difference. Well, it's a lot of money. I mean, 2 or 3 years ago, that was $1 billion for that mile and a half of road, and that's before everything gets built into all those areas. We need the political will. Well, these are the forums to do it. We have the study. We know that it's needed. We have people that want to build more stuff out here. It's not like we're reinventing the wheel. We've done a lot of that hard lifting already. Let's get the right people in the room to now make it happen, because that political will come. And we've already done the work. We've gotten it on some of the plans. Let's get it on more plans. To me, there's no reason why we shouldn't have something like Alpine does, right? I mean, to move that amount of people and support employment centers, commercial, recreation, etc. Somebody's gotta have a little foresight here
I just loved that it was like,
from them.
sometimes we're just screaming on the west side and sometimes you feel like deaf ears sometimes, but it was just really refreshing to hear somebody on the east side say that, wow. And Dee Theodore, she's always said that every time I see her, she's like, the traffic out here, because she's from up in Sandy's and saying, you know, she comes out, I think one of her kids is mountain biking and stuff, anyway, she comes out here fairly often, maybe it's Tim's, I can't remember. But,
That's the thing, is aligning those interests, right? Building the recreation, etc. The
Yeah.
more that those people are coming out here to do those things, then the more likely they are to support those projects. The problem is if nobody comes out, my cul-de-sac theory, right? We're the cul-de-sac, nobody comes out here unless they live here. Then none of them care about it, right? But if we get those other things going, then more of them care and want it.
yeah,
Then you have that political will.
Okay, talk about specific, I'd like to talk, and I don't know what council feels, I'd like to see 7,300 funding. I mean, I know that's going on corridor preservation, but I would like to push for money to fund that. Get that
That's just a
all-
corridor.
Right, that's what I'm
Talk
saying,
about
so fund the
construction.
road.
I don't know, that's gonna be more traffic, more after.
I think that's
That's
a
just a suggestion I would
key
like.
piece to ask for that. And UDOT's going to be going to construction here in the next year or so for U-111 as they wrap around and tie into Herriman Boulevard. The county had a
Another
handful
point
of-
for east-west.
Yes. The county had a handful of funding, that was sent to them when Olympia was in the county. Next city council meeting, you're gonna have a consent agenda item with the purchase agreements on it for some of those items to buy that right of way that is corridor preservation, it's reimbursable to the city. And included in, you won't see this one, but they had $4 million the county was approved for to build a section of 7,300 West in Olympia. And that money now comes to us to use as reimbursement. And I talked to the county today because it needed to be spent by December of next year. And the county said, since UDOT's taking so long and we might be chasing this other funding in corridor preservation, they're okay to extend that out. So that's another $4 million that we can use to build infrastructure out there.
That's great.
That feels like 800 feet.
Yeah, it's not that
No, I'm
much,
just
but.
kidding, it's terrible, it sounds so much, and then you see the cost, it's like.
And I'll just get back to echoing what Nathan said. I mean, I know all of these are that's what we need to hear, but I think what we kept hearing from our lobbyists is specific projects too. Like, what is it? I would like us as a council at some point to discuss what we want to see, what we would like to see as far as transit. Cause I don't know that we've all decided if we want for the red line extension, or if we want. And I don't know, that's
a really good discussion, I agree.
that's another, that might be a whole other discussion of what cause anytime I talk to UTA, they're like, well, what? And right now, I think it's on, is that tonight that we're, the next item? The next item, oh boy. I think South Jordan's really pushing now for an extension, they're wanting to help push that through. So if we're all on board with that, I think that's the way some other cities are going now, then I think we need to start pushing that as well on our end, to start pushing that on. Cause UTA, I'll tell you right now, they don't think tracks is viable, but again, we talk about, you start putting the parties into the table with, I think that could be resurrected, if you will. So, I mean, personally, I would like to see tracks extended, personally, so. And I don't think that eliminates BRT, where we've talked about it. But, again, we can debate that, we don't have to put that out now, but I would like to discuss that, I guess.
So really, in addition, you're asking us to really think about that, what you just proposed from the lobbyists, and maybe pop you some emails, just saying, hey, what about this?
Yeah, and we'll bring it back and we can create a document we hand out. The one of the changes we're making, we'll still have the map that we have, but we're gonna have a second map, which also includes our sister cities to the south, so Lehigh, Saratoga Springs, and Eagle Mountain, to show between this part, with the numbers Eagle Mountain was telling me today, will be over 120,000 entitled units in these cities.
Yeah, and then I think the problem is, like we've talked in the past, then you start to create a housing crisis on the other end, where you have way too much inventory of this type of housing. Steve and I talked about this a little bit today. I know the state has been talking about, quality of life. I heard that at the league meeting. I heard the state talking about quality of life. And first of all, it's a great phrase with no definition, because your quality of life and my quality of life probably has a completely different definition. So unless you're saying quality of life equals this, then it's just really meaningless. And to me, the way I picture a balanced community is it provides a quality of life that defines a lot of different people. Like, I can live in this type of housing because that's where I feel a quality of life. Or I can live in this because that's how I feel a quality of life, right? But if you push and legislate things that make cities make decisions that make them out of balance, then you eliminate quality of life for certain people, which I think is counterintuitive, right? You shouldn't. Anyway.
Well, we use the same words in all of our cities, and we mean different things.
Exactly.
And it drives me crazy. We're trying to figure out what each city means when they say multifamily.
Yeah, even the state is different. Yeah.
So Trevor Ram is working on that for us, working with some of the other cities to see, what do you mean when you say this? Because I will have conversations and a manager will say something and then, well, wait, what do you mean? And we're using similar words and we mean different things. So we're trying to, amongst ourselves, come to a common language so we can communicate that.
I mean, like affordable housing, moderate income housing, low income housing, accessible housing.
Workforce housing.
Those are 9 different things.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if you have any other things,
I do.
email Nathan. Oh, you wanna say now?
I got 3 that I really wanna talk about. Number 1 is, I think that we need to be pushing for connectivity with some of our neighboring cities, or at least one in particular. And if they're not going to be open to any connectivity, they should not be getting transportation funds. Frankly, that should they must provide connectivity, or they can't improve their own.
I'll talk to Mayor Ramsey.
Right, it's gotta be fixed, yeah, exactly. If they just build those roads, anyway. Second thing is, I'd really like to see some kind of a solution for Porter Rockwell Redwood intersection. That is an utter disaster. And with the closing of 134th coming up soon, that's gonna be a zillion times worse. The light timing is awful. It is just, it's
Yeah, well, even people
Awful.
going south that wanna turn to Herriman, you have to wait in a line before you can get close enough to turn. So
Yeah,
maybe
that's-
they could extend the right turn lane back to them.
That's what I'm,
So people
those
can-
kind of things,
they're
they're
not going
not,
to
don't have to
their
redo
turn.
anything, but just add some accommodation that would help
Yeah,
the traffic flow down there.
Even coming up to Mountain View,
Yeah,
how everybody races, gets in that left lane to
yep,
race.
yep.
That,
Instead of having.
it should be a stay left lane,
Right,
that you exit toward the left, like both lanes should just stay right turn, and then
yeah,
that
they
should
could
be.
probably even just stripe it differently. and
Right now,
not
cause
even
there's-
have to
cause
extend.
there's nothing to go forward,
Well,
unless you're a work
there's
vehicle, right?
a large monetary issue, those aren't legislative things, they're just UDOT issues that we can.
Yeah,
That's true.
but we can lobby for our legislators to kick UDOT in the rear end and
But we can have those
make
conversations
some
with
stuff
you
happen,
too.
so, yeah. And then, another thing that I think is an offensive thing we need to be advocating for is, when there's already 120,000 entitled units, and they keep pushing for more housing and more density, where are these people gonna work?
Oh, they have.
Where
to-
are they gonna shop?
And how are they gonna
Where are
get
they
to
gonna
and
get
from?
service provided? If you are adding all of these houses on the west side, and there are no employment centers on the west side, and there's no education centers on the west side, and there's no major recreational facilities on the west side, and all you're gonna do is build houses, you are just screwing it up. You're gonna make it bad for everyone. And there should be some kind of measurement that says, if you are going to build this many houses, you must also create this many jobs. Or you must also have this much, business space or commercial space or something, right? So that there has to be some kind of balanced development in huge swaths of the valley. So it's not just house, little neighborhood market. That's not going to sustain, a 500,000 more people employment-wise. We have to worry about the economic impacts of that, so
They're out
that's
here
another
working
thing I
on
would really
live
like our legislators to be focused on, so.
And we are working on getting them together. It looks like with Representative Perucci, that will be a special meeting or just a different time because she couldn't make those other days.
I just have to think of viable suggestion for that, cause there's all sorts of arguments for, private land ownership and where the state wants to put centers and things like that, but I think the biggest issue that most of us feel on a daily basis is just the basic supporting infrastructure of water and roads. I mean, we, in my opinion, and the reason I got involved in all of this from the get-go, was we're putting in way too much out here already and never planned for that supporting infrastructure. The city's already gone way over what we should have, right? Then the legislature piles on and says, well, you have to do more, and don't give us, what the standards that you mentioned.
Right.
Give those existing cities no credit for what they had already put in. So I think the league can do a better job of advocating for giving cities credit for what they have done. And if you're gonna force more upon us, there are some basic supporting infrastructure, and I'm just talking water and roads.
I mean, just for
Right.
our city's
That-
building,
that
what do you
have-
say, we need another 20,000 acre feet of water rights we
If-
have to come up with
Right?
somehow?
If you're going to require that density, then then the state should be funding upgrades to that infrastructure to support it.
Yeah.
Cause they're putting that requirement. on
I actually
us.
think that's kind of where we should, if we can come up with specific projects, we make that
Well-
pitch and then we say, so fund these roads.
And
Right.
that
Fund
comes
this.
into, I talked to Cam.
Olympia's a
I
huge.
stayed after and talked to
Yeah,
Cam after
county
OPC Monday. We're planning that next summit, next step 2 of that summit with the Southwest Salt Lake, Northern. Cam recommended, I love this. Basically, now we have all the numbers, we've got all, so the next meeting is, everybody sits down and says, okay, this growth is coming, these 130,000 units, this is what we need. This is what, as cities, put down those things on a map. Just put them on a map, infrastructure, we need a road here to support it, we need water tank here. We gotta lay those all out now for our state legislators to say, this is what's coming for us to handle this. We need an east-west road, we need an east-west, we need money, and it's basically to say, the growth is coming, we need the money for infrastructure.
You've done
Yeah.
what you've made us do,
But
right?
I think too, I agree with all that, but I also think too, part of that infrastructure is job centers. That has
Right,
to
and
be
that's what-
part of it. I
Exactly.
asked
Jobs and
Cam, I
recreation.
asked Cam about this
100%.
in one of those caucus meetings, or probably Justin. Why aren't on this list of things that we get credit for this housing stuff, why isn't job centers listed on there? Why aren't we getting credit back? Instead of saying, yeah, we didn't build a whole bunch of apartments here, but we've created a big job center where people can work. And that contributes to housing affordability even more than
That's right.
small units, you know what I mean?
Especially if you build, I mean, for example, you build an Adobe, you employ
Good
what,
job.
4,000 people making 6 figures,
Yeah.
We've been preaching this stuff for
Jeez.
years, but we have landowners who refuse to do it because they make more money
Building
building houses.
Right.
And to me, that the disconnect is the legislature, which is driven by making money building houses, and they have their own project, they want the employment centers to be there, right? But to me, that's the big disconnect with those things. But I feel like where we can, with the help of our allies, push back is, fine, if you're not willing to bridge that divide for those reasons, you're still putting too much of a burden on us with these,
Yeah.
this density and moderate income and whatever else it is. You need to put some dollars on the table to support the supporting infrastructure.
Yep.
You're putting all of that on us and it's impossible. It simply is impossible to do.
We're scrimping by, you guys have.
Yeah, and you're
$1
putting
billion
all of those
surpluses
other things
in it.
over here, which not only take away that, I could go on with my dissertation about balanced land use, right? Not only are you taking that away from us, but you're compounding, right, my compounding traffic problem and water, you're compounding all of that. Like, you need to be part of the solution.
Yeah, just put you got 6,000 houses here, you got another 10 or 12,000 houses that are going up over there in the Rio Tinto thing that just annexed.
25,000.
25,000 houses?
That's what
That's
South
their
Jordan
entitlement.
has entitled, is 25,000 homes.
Idiots. Anyway, 25,000, Steven, are you, come on, that's the single stupidest land use decision I've ever heard. I'll go on record, if you want to go over to their city council and say it to them, I will. But when you've got that many freaking houses and all of that traffic coming, that is going to destroy the center of the valley if there's no employment out here. You're gonna put
There's
25,000
plenty of
houses
It's
with,
exactly
you
what
know,
I was talking about.
3.3 cars a house or
Compounds
whatever,
all those problems.
going down
They're all gonna
126th,
work and
118th, and
play.
114th every day. When those all converge on I-15,
Okay.
No,
it's gonna blow it up.
I think we have some
We're
things,
gonna move on.
we can
Let's
email.
move on. We've all said our piece.
As long as it's not just me saying.
Okay, 2.5. Bryce, how long is it gonna take you?
Bryce is fast.
Hopefully 10 minutes.
Right, you're
Okay.
fast.
So the meeting this did take an hour when we were with the stakeholders, but I think we can do 10 minutes in here. Will be the goal. So as you know, we have received grant money to partner with Wasatch Front for a transit study within Herriman. We have several corridors that have been identified for future transit use. And so this is kind of our effort to say, hey, these corridors are already there. What is feasible to use in it? Is it a red line extension? Is it a BRT? Is it a local bus? What works? And this is us working with a consultant to model these different transit modes and see how they do. So with that said, there are three land use scenarios. A low growth scenario, which is what the old Wasatch Front plan was based on. What we call a mid-growth scenario is what we're expecting with our land use and what we've been using for our transportation master plan. And then a high growth, which is if you were to alter some of the current MDAs that we have to be more transit friendly in those land uses that haven't been built yet. They may be committed, but if we were to able to work with those developers to be more transit friendly in their development, how would that impact? So we ran a low growth scenario, a mid growth scenario, and a high growth scenario with three modes: a local bus, a BRT, which is bus rapid transit, and then a light rail extension. And just let's see how it performs. Right? So we've been working on that for the last 6 months. So that's kind of what I've been talking about, is that's the breakdown of the models that we ran. So first up is a frequent bus, and these are the corridors, so we're kind of zoomed out, but this is where Red Line ends at the Daybreak Station. So this is the town center corridor that we've already preserved and is there to be used at any time, all the way down to the Slick campus, U of U campus, and the RSL complex. That right of way has already been preserved, right? So that's one of the study areas. The other study area is coming out from 118 down through Olympia and then connecting back into the town center. So And I will say there has been some recent discussions on changing the land use in Olympia to be more transit friendly. This does not account for that depth of change, right? This is not accounting for that. As far as going for an HTRZ zone, right? That's a significant density change than what we're looking at right now. And so that's not accounted for in these model runs. So yeah, first up, we tested the frequent bus mode, and these circles are potential stop locations, right? They're
You
more.
can tell me there won't be that many stops, right?
So yeah, frequent bus, as you know, they only stop when people are actually standing at the stop or if someone requests them to stop, but they're in normal traffic. So for a frequent bus, they're just in a normal road and they don't stop at every one of these, just if someone's there, right? Or if someone on the bus pulls the cord. So yeah, that's typical spacing for just a local bus, which we do not have currently in Herriman. Our only transit is the micro transit or the app on-demand transit. So this is kind of how many trips are produced or how many people are getting on a bus in the model run. So yes, yeah, daily. So 1,700, and that can count as a person can count twice, right? They can get it on going somewhere and then going back home, right? So this is the results, and in general, our Herriman Town Center, and this goes for all the modes, as you'll see, performs very well in a lot of these cases. So I won't get into too much detail unless we want to jump into that. I'm going to kind of jump over some of this stuff, so feel free to slow me down or tell me to describe something more. But this will continue to show up. This is a kind of a comparison of LRTs, that light rail transit, so red line extension, and front runner. We know what the front runner is, the commuter trail, BRT. And so these are some comparisons of other areas and what it does to those system-wide improvements, right? So this is a system-wide, how many trips are produced that day on the light rail or on the red line. If we incorporate this frequent bus, it's suggesting that we would add about 800 trips to the light rail system with a frequent bus. So let's move on to the BRT results. So spacing's a little bit further out, just like we talked about, but they do stop at every stop. And the headways are a lot shorter. So frequent bus is more like 30 minutes, maybe an hour on off-peak times of when the bus will show up. But BRT is generally 15-minute headways at maximum. So you can see the ridership nearly doubles from a frequent bus to a bus rapid transit in Herriman. And this is, again, looking at those same corridors, just a different mode, right? And the Herriman Town Center does pretty well as far as comparison to other areas that are planned for BRTs. The difference with a bus rapid transit, a BRT, obviously, is that they generally have their own dedicated lane and they're not in mixed traffic. And again, those headways are short, so people don't really have to plan their day around a bus schedule. They just know, hey, if I go to the bus stop, it's gonna be here in 10 minutes at most, right? So that's part of the other part is these connections to the east we've seen in the model are really important. So our corridor goes to, like we said, the Salt Lake Community College and the RSL area. These connections over through the Point development and up to the Draper Front Runner Station for both corridors are essential to picking up and getting people to those job centers that we're talking about, right?
And is it the same for the tracks, daybreak park? That one right there goes to the tracks.
Yes, yeah. So that green line is also underneath the blue line, the blue line there. So yeah. So every mode we ran kind of made the assumption that we're coming off of that red line daybreak station. And then finally, a tracks red line extension model run is what we did. So this one is a little bit unique where we didn't actually show the connection all the way to the east. We just extended it to what was shown in the regional transportation plan as far as corridor preservation goes. And so this area comes down through the town center, goes through 132 South, through Mountain View Village area, and then kind of dead ends at the Riverton Hospital.
Bryce, does Riverton have that property set aside for that?
So through this area, they do, I know not up here yet, so. So they do have, just like we have, they have a corridor kind of up to, I think, this point, right? So, again, this is the trips we're adding. It's a little bit less than the BRT because we're just adding 4 stops, right? But this is actually, if you look, these size of circles are the ridership at each stop comparison. So at our Anthem Park, at the town center, at Mountain View Village, we're pretty comparable to existing stations, right? If there was a red line extension. So I'll just kind of take a step back. At the beginning of the project, we did face some resistance from UTA to run these models because it's kind of their baby, I guess. And so we're kind of working outside of what they normally do, right? Or we are doing what they normally do. But after seeing these results, they would actually like us to run the red line extension to do what we did with these other ones, to actually show it going all the way through to the east and down Port Rockwell and over to the point. I think we were picking up some steam and different angles, right, of the idea of a red line extension. And this model is actually very helpful for us to have those discussions, to say, hey, this has feasibility, right? That's been the drawback or the pushback from UTA, is that it's not feasible to have the red line extended. But based on these model runs, we will kind of continue to look at it, and when we get that tracks to front runner, it'll get those same trips that we're getting from the BRT. The only reason we're under right now is because we're dead ending that in Herriman, right? So this is just an update, not necessarily need a decision at this point. We'll come back with the final recommendations and what kind of information we receive, but just as the mayor was discussing, I think we're starting to see a little bit of a turn in the perspective from UTA and UDOT on some of the transit aspects that need to be incorporated in Herriman. And that's really the intent of this project, is to put transit projects on the long-range plan, right? So,
When you come back with that update, would you highlight some deltas between this information and what the new stuff is? I'm really curious to see how much more ridership is being suggested because of that.
okay, yeah, we can do that.
Is there anything being studied about the cost comparison between widening roads or providing those east-west connections versus how much it's gonna cost to do a BRT or a tracks?
Not as part of this study. I think that could be kind of a next step once we determine, hey, yeah, red line is feasible, it is the best option, or BRT is the best option. We can then start to compare those costs to widening roads and going from there.
Herriman gondola the same.
Yeah.
You know, even looking at,
Cheaper than the one up the canyon.
looking at this scale though, you can
There's a
start
lot more
to
people.
imagine how transit could actually be used. And you're getting the attention of our transit regional planning partners. That is excellent.
Yeah, and like I said, that's really the goal of the study, is to put transit projects that we know will work and get the attention of the regional players, so.
Actually, the gondola, it is above ground, you don't have to worry about these riding races there. Sand.
We should just do an aerial.
Yeah,
That's what we're talking about.
Is it a monorail or a?
Yeah, play Disney.
Just thinking this is lagoon style.
Okay, thank you, Bryce. Strong work.
One that goes that
Strong
fast?
Last one.
Okay, yeah, we'll do so I need a temporary, we're gonna do this right, cause we did not know why. So I need a temporary recess. Sorry, Jess.
Motion to temporarily recess city council work meeting so that we can convene in city council general meeting.
Okay,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
mean, we could about Teddy or speak.
Good question.
Frustrating, because I